Yeah, one of the things that I like about open education broadly and open pedagogy specifically is it takes this traditional role that education has, which is there are only a certain number of people who get to be the bearers of knowledge, right? Those are people who write textbooks, who teach classes, and students end up being passive learners in that scenario. And what open education does is sort of flips that script and allows students to really be not only active learners, but really people who are engaged in the knowledge creation process for that discipline. And it really allows them, like I said, that more active process in their learning. No, I don't really think this kind of assignment cheapens the instructor's role as an authority figure. I think if anything, it really strengthens the relationship between student and instructor, because what you're doing is allowing students, again, who are previously sort of passive in this experience, you're allowing them to take control of their learning. I think students really respect you as an instructor when you're able to do that, when you give them, when you trust them in that experience. And so if anything, I think these kind of projects actually strengthen any sort of relationship that I have with my students. I think open pedagogy is really well suited to help us achieve diversity and inclusion goals. There's a pretty traditional type of person who writes textbooks. It's people who are really well educated. Historically, it's been white men, and that doesn't reflect our students in the classroom. We have first-generation students, we have racially and ethnically diverse students, we have age-diverse students, and so what open pedagogy does is allows our students to really tell their stories, and then that gets reflected in the educational content that we're then using in classes. In the psychology department, for instance, we have versions of our books that are specific to WCU students in the Pullman campus. So for instance, we can link to counseling and psychological services within our textbook materials. I can show you an example of that here. Yeah, in terms of what open pedagogy can provide that's not traditionally measured on a grading rubric, I think one of those is ownership of their work. Students really have a buy-in to these kinds of projects. They recognize that it's sort of outside of the norm, and there's this level of trust there that students appreciate. I also think it's a greater appreciation of how knowledge is created and cultivated. If you look at a resource like Wikipedia, students might not understand all of the work that goes into creating something like Wikipedia. Open pedagogy projects allow us to give them a hand in creating those kinds of materials, and it really gives them a better understanding of how they can then use those resources. Traditionally, the people who get to decide what counts as important, specifically in educational realms, are unfortunately rich old white men. And that's been changing a lot recently, but I think open pedagogy allows us to speed up that change. Again, we get to give our students the opportunity to tell their own stories, to talk about their communities, to reflect on their backgrounds in ways that fit into our discipline. It's not like we're going outside of the norms, but in ways that future students can come along and say, wow, that example looks like me, or that example sounds like my family. And I think that really is a powerful experience, not just for the current students, but for any students in the future who get to interact with that material.